All right. This establishment is not authorized. You cannot conduct judicial proceedings from a commercial building like this. There's a federal courthouse annex, officer. I am Judge Harrison. That emblem behind me. I do not care what designation you use. City ordinances mandate that you secure a permit. Local ordinances are not applicable to Article 3 tribunals. Federal jurisdiction supersedes municipal permitting requirements. Refer to Title 28, Section 39. Officer Daniel Harrove barged into a black man's place of business, alleged him of operating an illicit enterprise, and menaced to shutter the entire office before the day concluded. Unbeknownst to him, the individual he was badgering is a federal judge, and this altercation will precipitate a lawsuit so calamitous it will extinguish his professional existence and exact millions. Before we proceed, kindly indicate your geographical location from which you are viewing this content, and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you absolutely will not want to miss. Officer Daniel Hargrove possessed a notoriety that preceded him. He was widely known for his persecution of black men, singling them out for minor infractions, and unnecessarily intensifying confrontations. Some characterized it as assertiveness, others as prejudice, spoken in hushed tones within police stations and offices alike. Today he was confronting a target he presumed he could cow, secure in the belief that his badge rendered him impervious. "Hey, you there," Hargrove bellowed as he approached the reception desk. "I have been informed this establishment is operating unlawfully. I possess the authority to shut it down forthwith, and I require no justification." The individual behind the desk raised his head with composure, meeting Harrove's stare. Judge Elijah Thompson, 50 years of age, a respected federal judge renowned for his acute intellect and decades of experience overseeing law enforcement, remained unfazed. His demeanor was placid yet authoritative, the kind of commanding presence that caused Harrove to falter momentarily. "Officer, you are mistaken. This office is in complete compliance. I advise you to consult the relevant statutes before issuing threats," Judge Thompson stated calmly. Harrove's lips contorted into a sneer. "Do not instruct me on my actions. I have dealt with individuals like you previously. You believe you can simply retort, 'Everyone, vacate the premises, or I shall compel your departure.'" He advanced, endeavoring to overawe Judge Thompson through sheer physicality. His reputation for intimidation was forged in instances such as this, pressuring individuals until they faltered, offered apologies, or capitulated. However, this occasion presented someone who refused to cede ground. "I am not here to engage in debate, officer," Judge Thompson declared with evenness. "You lack the authority to cease operations at this office. This falls under federal jurisdiction. Any attempt to do so without adhering to proper procedures is unlawful." Harrove emitted a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Federal, you say? It matters not to me. I observe a violation, I act. Do you imagine your esteemed title grants you immunity?" The employees, frozen in apprehension, exchanged anxious glances. Some discreetly reached for their mobile devices, documenting every utterance. Harrove paid them no heed. His objective transcended mere law enforcement. It was to humiliate, to assert dominance in the presence of onlookers, to demonstrate who held sway. "You are threatening me," Judge Thompson remarked quietly, leaning forward slightly. "However, you are unaware of the individual you are confronting. I suggest you reassess your actions before this escalates further." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Reassess? Who are you to dictate my conduct? I can close this office today. That is my prerogative, and do not assume I will refrain. Individuals like you require a lesson in their proper standing." Judge Thompson maintained his composure, allowing the threats to linger. Each accusation, each step taken by Harrove, served only to underscore the officer's imprudence. "You cannot continue to defy me in such a manner," Hargrove stated, striking the desk lightly with his fist, causing several files to tremble. "Do you comprehend me? This establishment will be shuttered before the day concludes. Everyone, evacuate." "I do comprehend you," Judge Thompson responded equitably. "And I am equally cognizant of the law. You do not possess the authority to effectuate the closure of this office. Any action you undertake now is illicit and will be addressed accordingly." Harrove's countenance suffused with vexation. His customary stratagems were proving ineffective. This was not a cowering individual like Clark, a proprietor seeking to evade trouble. This man was deliberate, composed, and unwavering, qualities that rendered Harrow visibly uneasy. Deliberate, composed. "You believe that impresses me?" Harrow scoffed. "Your qualifications are of no consequence to me. I possess the means to shut this place down. You will lament standing against me." Judge Thompson finally set aside his documents, meeting Harrow's glare directly. "Officer, I am articulating a fact, not issuing a threat. Your present conduct is unlawful. I advise you to cease before you exacerbate your own predicament." Harrow derided. "Unlawful? Do not lecture me. I have encountered men of your ilk throughout my career. I know how to manage this situation." "You have encountered men of my ilk," Judge Thompson stated placidly. "However, you have never encountered someone quite like me. I am fully apprised of my entitlements, and you will be held accountable should this harassment persist." A palpable silence ensued. Harrow's jaw tightened, his mind frantically seeking a means to reassert control. Every assertion made by Judge Thompson eroded his confidence. Each measured retort rendered Harrow's menace hollow. "You consider yourself untouchable, do you not?" Harrow sneered, pacing slightly. "I have observed individuals in your position. They capitulate, they apologize, and they retreat. You will not. But heed my words. This is not concluded. I am not capitulating," Judge Thompson declared simply. "And I do not require an apology for upholding the law. Any attempt to intimidate me is duly recorded, and you will answer for it." Harrow's hands clenched, his face contorted in frustration. He could sense the scrutiny of the room, the recordings, the documentation of every misstep. He had relinquished control. Judge Thompson's equanimity had turned the confrontation back upon him, and he was utterly oblivious to the fact that the man he was menacing was a federal judge, an individual possessing the authority and resources to transmute every infraction, every threat, into a case capable of terminating his career. Hargrove retreated a step, muttering about adherence to regulations and jurisdictional authority, attempting to salvage a semblance of dominance he no longer possessed. Judge Thompson resumed his paperwork, unperturbed, meticulously documenting the threats and intimidation for the inevitable repercussions. The initial engagement had concluded not with a dramatic resolution, but with a discernible shift in power. Hargrove had entered with the intention of intimidating and dominating, only to be met by composed, resolute authority. And every individual within that office understood that the subsequent encounter would not transpire peacefully. Hargrove had underestimated Judge Thompson, and that misjudgment would soon exact a devastating toll. Officer Daniel Harrow did not depart the office. Instead, he lingered near the entrance, vocalizing his discontent regarding authority and compliance, his gaze sweeping over the employees as if they were complicit in a criminal act. Every whispered dissent served to inflame his animosity. "Listen, I am granting you one final opportunity," Hargrove stated, his voice sharp. "I can shut down this entire office forthwith. No discussion, no argument. Everyone, depart." Judge Elijah Thompson slowly raised his head, meeting Harrow's hostile stare without hesitation. "Officer, your threats have been officially noted. I am issuing you a warning. Continued harassment is a violation of the law. You are not vested with the authority to enforce shutdowns within this jurisdiction." Hargrove scoffed. "Illegal? Do not presume to instruct me on legality. I have executed such actions previously, and individuals of your disposition invariably comply. They capitulate. You will not evade repercussions for defying me." "Compliance is irrelevant when you are contravening the law," Judge Thompson stated with measured tones. "I strongly advise you to withdraw before this situation deteriorates further." Harrow's face reddened. He cast a glance at the employees, observing their subtle movements, their devices recording. This observation seemed only to augment his frustration. "Do you believe this alters anything? This office is subject to my discretion for closure if I deem it so. You will come to regret this." "You are squandering your efforts by threatening me," Judge Thompson replied calmly. "You are unaware of the individual you are confronting, and you are on the precipice of facing significant repercussions for your conduct." For a moment, Hargrove faltered. His typical tactics of intimidation were failing to elicit the anticipated response. He advanced, extending a finger towards the judge. I have handled men of your caliber before. I harbor no regard for titles, legal counsel, or any purported affiliations you may possess. This situation is under my command. I command it as well, Judge Thompson stated, his voice resolute. I am the upholder of the law. Your present conduct infringes upon civil liberties. Every utterance, every action you undertake is being meticulously recorded. Harov's jaw tightened. Documented. So what? This office will still be shuttered. I possess the requisite authority. No, you do not, Judge Thompson declared firmly. Your authority is contingent upon its legality. Currently, all your actions are beyond the purview of the law. Cease this harassment, or the consequences will be severe. Harov slammed his hand upon the desk, causing the papers to jolt. Do you imagine I am concerned? I am unconcerned. You will learn your proper place, and this office will bear the brunt of your hubris. Judge Thompson remained unperturbed. Your escalation is your prerogative, officer. I am extending to you the opportunity to resolve this amicably, but I will not countenance unlawful threats. Employees shifted uncomfortably, some conversing in hushed tones. Harov disregarded them. His intent was to assert dominance, to project control over the unfolding scenario. However, the more he threatened, the more apparent his lack of authority became. Are you listening to me? Hargrove snapped, his voice escalating in volume. Everyone vacate the premises, or I will ensure this establishment is closed before midday. Judge Thompson leaned forward slightly, his voice calm yet piercing through the palpable tension. Your threats are unsubstantiated, Officer Harov. Your actions are officially recorded. You lack jurisdiction here. Continuing this harassment constitutes a federal offense. Harov froze for a brief interval, recognizing the veracity of the statements. His body language betrayed apprehension, yet his pride and arrogance propelled him forward. Do you believe I fear you? He shouted. You ought to, Judge Thompson stated with composure, not out of personal fear, but in anticipation of the repercussions you are precipitating. Every action, every threat is being catalogued. You are accountable. For a considerable duration, neither man uttered a sound. Harov's countenance revealed his profound frustration. The employees remained tense, their devices discreetly capturing every word. Hargrove was demonstrably losing his grip on the situation, a fact that was becoming increasingly evident. Finally, Hargrove stepped back, murmuring about adherence to regulations and proper enforcement protocols, though his tone lacked conviction. Judge Thompson returned to his paperwork, maintaining a calm and collected demeanor, documenting the encounter with the meticulousness of someone accustomed to confronting far less formidable challenges. The confrontation had intensified. Humiliation mounted for the officer in the presence of witnesses. His threats were diminishing in credibility. His authority was undermined, and Judge Thompson's unwavering composure made it abundantly clear this was not the conclusion. Hargrove had overstepped his bounds, and the subsequent development would dictate the full ramifications. Even at this juncture, employees conversed in low tones, exchanging glances, cognizant that what had commenced as a supposed enforcement action had already undergone a dramatic reversal. The officer, who had entered with an air of confidence and aggression, was now exposed, restrained solely by the composed authority of a federal judge who refused to be intimidated. Hargrove uttered one final admonishment before departing, but the damage was irrevocably done. Every witness, every recording, and every word would fuel the inevitable legal repercussions. Judge Thompson remained calm and collected, fully aware that this was merely the commencement, and that the $12 million lawsuit looming on the horizon represented merely the inaugural chapter in the officer's descent. Officer Daniel Hargrove had exited the premises, but the encounter was far from concluded. News of his conduct disseminated rapidly. Employees who had recorded the confrontation promptly reported the incident. Within hours, higher authorities were apprised, and the officer's behavior came under intense scrutiny. By the following morning, Internal Affairs had initiated a formal investigation. Harov, oblivious to the full extent of the ensuing backlash, persisted in asserting that his actions had been appropriate. I followed procedure. I acted as any officer would, he contended to his supervisor, attempting to legitimize his threats. However, the recordings presented a starkly contrasting depiction. His aggressive tone, his repeated threats to shut down the office, and his refusal to heed Judge Elijah Thompson's explanations constituted irrefutable evidence of harassment. The documentation was equally crucial. Judge Thompson had meticulously chronicled every threat, every allegation, and every instance of intimidation. Federal oversight officials promptly reviewed the case. "This transcends a standard complaint," one investigator remarked. "We are examining a sworn officer menacing a federal judge, repeatedly disregarding jurisdictional boundaries. This escalates beyond routine harassment." Concurrently, Judge Thompson prepared his official response. He lodged formal complaints with the police department and engaged his legal counsel. "I wish for every detail to be meticulously documented," he instructed his staff. "This conduct is utterly unacceptable. We will pursue the full measure of consequences." Harrov, still confident in his approach, returned to the precinct later that week. He informed his colleagues, "That individual can do nothing to me. I executed my duties as expected. Adherence to protocol, regulations, enforcement. It is my profession." However, hushed conversations and the accumulating evidence suggested otherwise. Staff members had repeatedly reviewed the body camera footage, noting the officer's aggressive posture, his pronouncements of threat, and his blatant disregard for federal jurisdiction. Even his peers began to question his judgment. Judge Thompson elevated the matter to federal authorities. His correspondence was direct, detailing each action Harrov had undertaken: unauthorized threats, harassment, violations of civil rights, and interference with federal operations. "This officer must be held accountable," the letter concluded. "Such behavior cannot be tolerated." Hargrove began to perceive mounting pressure, though he outwardly refused to acknowledge it. Every telephone call, every meeting, and every memorandum he received served as a stark reminder that his actions had been documented, reviewed, and unequivocally criticized. Nevertheless, he confided in his colleagues, "I fail to comprehend the gravity of the situation. I was acting in an enforcement capacity. If anyone lodges a complaint, that is their prerogative." The facts, however, told an entirely different narrative. Witness testimonies, recorded evidence, and Judge Thompson's precise documentation constructed an undeniable account. A reckless officer exceeding his authority, harassing a federal judge, and menacing a business operating without jurisdiction. Internal Affairs ultimately summoned Harrov for a formal interview. "We require your perspective on the matter," the investigator initiated. "We possess recordings, statements from staff, and the judge's documentation." Harrov, adopting a defensive and frustrated posture, attempted to deflect. "I was enforcing the regulations. They were not in compliance. I possessed absolute right." "You were threatening a federal judge," the investigator countered. "You disregarded repeated warnings, escalated the situation unnecessarily, and created liability for this department. Your authority does not extend to this location. This constitutes serious misconduct." For the first time, Harrov apprehended that his confident pronouncements of control were disintegrating. Each statement he articulated was contradicted by the available evidence. Every threat he had issued was now permanently recorded, and Judge Thompson's meticulous preparation ensured that there could be no ambiguity regarding the officer's culpability. Judge Thompson, meanwhile, had fully briefed his legal team. He was not acting out of anger, but rather with strategic intent. "This represents a pattern of abuse," he explained. "We meticulously document, formally submit, and allow the legal process to unfold. The consequences will inevitably follow, and this will establish a critical precedent." As news of the investigation circulated internally, Hargrove's reputation began to erode. Colleagues who had previously respected his authority now questioned his judgment. Supervisors recognized that the situation had escalated far beyond typical enforcement actions. The officer had deliberately targeted a high-ranking federal official without any justifiable cause. Harrov endeavored to maintain an appearance of composure. "I performed my duties. I adhered to protocol," he insisted in various meetings, yet every recorded interaction played back in his mind like an incessant reminder of his failure. Judge Thompson's measured responses and composed demeanor had starkly illuminated the officer's recklessness. By the conclusion of that week, the narrative had transcended internal channels and entered the public domain. News outlets reported that a police officer had menaced a federal judge and attempted to illegally shutter his place of business. Public outcry intensified, and calls for accountability grew increasingly vocal. Harrove faced internal disciplinary action, federal oversight, and the looming prospect of civil litigation. Judge Thompson continued to document every interaction with unwavering precision, ensuring that each exchange was duly accounted for. The foundation for a substantial lawsuit was now firmly established, and the officer's threats, once employed as instruments of intimidation, had transformed into the central evidence for a case that could potentially result in millions in damages. Harrove, finally grasping the profound implications of the situation, attempted to offer a defense. "I harbored no ill intent," he told his colleagues, "but the recordings, the eyewitness accounts, and Judge Thompson's meticulous records left no room for any further justifications." The initial confrontation had escalated into a comprehensive investigation. Hargrove had operated under the misguided belief that he could exert dominance, intimidate, and control the situation. But the established facts, the collected evidence, and the overarching federal authority ensured that his actions would not proceed unchecked. Judge Thompson's deliberate responses, his tranquil demeanor, and his acute awareness of his legal rights had entirely reversed the balance of power. The officer who had entered the office with confidence and aggression now found himself under intense scrutiny, exposed to legal and professional ramifications that would pursue him relentlessly. The $12 million lawsuit was no longer a theoretical possibility. It was now an imminent reality. And for Officer Daniel Hargrove, the confrontation that had begun with threats and intimidation had irrevocably devolved into a career-defining public spectacle and a financially devastating debacle. The investigation into Officer Daniel Harrove's conduct had reached its conclusion, and the findings were incontrovertible. His threats directed at Judge Elijah Thompson, the persistent harassment, and his flagrant disregard for jurisdictional authority had been exhaustively documented. The evidence was clear, overwhelming, and left no avenue for denial. Judge Thompson, maintaining his composed demeanor throughout the proceedings, had instructed his legal team to initiate proceedings for a civil lawsuit. "This matter is about accountability," he stated. "No individual, irrespective of their position, is exempt from the law. We are pursuing this action with full commitment for the official record and as a matter of principle." Harrove received the formal notification of the lawsuit with a palpable sense of disbelief. $12 million, he uttered under his breath. "This is preposterous. I committed no wrongdoing." The legal team representing Judge Thompson, however, held a fundamentally different perspective. They presented the recorded evidence, the testimonies of witnesses, and the detailed documentation of every threat and act of intimidation. Harrove's own pronouncements, captured on video, formed the focal point of the case. Federal authorities had already flagged the incident internally. Harrove faced suspension pending a comprehensive disciplinary review. His colleagues were no longer exhibiting defensiveness or offering support. The overwhelming weight of the evidence had irrevocably altered the entire department's perception of him. During the preliminary court hearings, Judge Thompson provided his testimony in a precise and factual manner. "Officer Harrove threatened to shut down my office without any legal basis," he stated. "He disregarded multiple warnings and infringed upon civil rights in a targeted, racially motivated fashion. The documentation clearly illustrates a pattern of harassment." Harrove attempted to mount a defense. "I was enforcing compliance. I had every right to do so," he exclaimed. But each objection was systematically countered with irrefutable evidence. The officer's words, his tone, and his actions, repeatedly captured on recordings, corroborated by the testimonies of witnesses. The courtroom closely followed the unfolding drama. The narrative was straightforward yet profoundly impactful. A police officer, confident in his perceived power, attempted to intimidate a black federal judge, only to confront overwhelming legal repercussions. Analysts observed the rarity of a federal judge being targeted in such an overt manner, and the remarkable effectiveness with which Judge Thompson had documented the entire encounter. The case rapidly garnered national attention. Media outlets reported on the lawsuit. highlighting Harov's overreach, the federal judge's calm defiance, and the $12 million civil claim. Public reaction was swift and decisive. A significant portion of the public voiced strong disapproval regarding the officer's conduct, commending Judge Thompson for his thorough approach and unwavering stance against coercion. The Internal Affairs Division concluded their investigation, officially noting Harov's transgressions in several categories, including persistent harassment, improper use of authority, and discriminatory targeting based on race. The police department initiated proceedings to place him on an indefinite leave, pending the resolution of further disciplinary measures. His reputation and professional standing suffered immensely, a direct consequence of his imprudent escalation of the situation. Judge Thompson's judicial chamber, meanwhile, resumed its operations as usual, with the legal challenge serving as both validation and a guiding example for future cases. This matter is not about personal animosity, Judge Thompson stated in a public address. It is fundamentally about responsibility. When individuals vested with authority misuse their power, such actions demand rectification. The legal framework must be applied equitably to every individual. The courtroom proceedings advanced with considerable speed. Evidence was meticulously presented under Judge Thompson's composed and authoritative guidance, creating a striking contrast with Hargrove's defensive posture and growing unease. Testimonies from witnesses detailed Harov's aggressive behavior, his recurrent threats, and the pervasive climate of fear he cultivated. By the time the final judgment was rendered in the civil litigation, the presiding judge acknowledged the gravity of Harov's offenses. The claimant has effectively demonstrated a pattern of consistent harassment, intimidation, and outright defiance of federal mandates. The officer's behavior constitutes a flagrant infringement upon civil liberties and necessitates substantial recompense. Harov's astonishment was almost tangible when the $12 million judgment was pronounced. His professional life, once characterized by confidence and command, had disintegrated under the burden of his own transgressions. Every attempt he had made to intimidate and assert dominance had been meticulously recorded, thoroughly examined, and ultimately used against him. Judge Thompson, maintaining his characteristic firmness, underscored the principle of accountability in his public remarks. Position inherently brings with it a duty of care. The exertion of pressure, the infliction of distress, and the misappropriation of power will invariably incur repercussions. This case serves as definitive proof that no one stands above the law and that justice extends its reach impartially, irrespective of rank or official insignia. The narrative concluded not merely with financial penalties, but with a broader societal message concerning the perils of unchecked power. Harov's actions stood as a stark warning to both law enforcement personnel and public servants, illustrating the repercussions of exceeding established boundaries and unfairly targeting individuals. The lawsuit resolved the immediate legal conflict, yet its broader implications resonated widely. Law enforcement agencies re-evaluated their operational guidelines, internal investigation procedures were strengthened, and officers received renewed directives regarding the precise limits of their authority. Judge Thompson's diligent record-keeping and his calm, unyielding demeanor became a benchmark for holding influential figures accountable. Ultimately, the outcome was unequivocal. Officer Daniel Harov's attempts to instill fear proved to be a complete failure. Judge Elijah Thompson's authority, meticulous preparation, and serene resolve not only safeguarded his own rights, but also established a landmark precedent in civil accountability. For all who followed this unfolding event, it serves as a powerful reminder to stand resolute in the face of intimidation. Understanding one's rights and meticulously documenting every interaction can effectively counteract even the most aggressive adversaries. If you believe in the paramount importance of justice and the inevitable triumph of accountability, please share your location in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel and ensure you follow for more compelling narratives of this nature.